Good day, everyone! London Onion here, returning with our recent Warden and Challenger build, aka our Bolstered Blitzer.
Embarrassing name.
Yeah, we've been through that already. For those that need a recap or missed the previous installment, you can find it
right here. Right here.
I'll be here when you get back. For the rest of us, let's discuss how this Blitzer takes on bosses. Starting with bosses that test the adaptive capability, we'll take a quick look at Legion. According to this Onion's standards, Legion is considered a sentry dominant boss, and makes close-range offense extremely difficult. Throughout the fight, one will mostly be relegated to using the Bonesaw LMG. Additionally, since this boss has varied vulnerability, an opportunistic approach is most logical. Unfortunately, there will be a high demand on ammunition, but the Skewer mod is an effective supplement for inflicting damage quickly while the eye is vulnerable. Also, due to the Insight trait, its generation should not take an unreasonable amount of time. The close-range prowess of this Blitzer unfortunately takes a back seat to defeating the boss. But, and this is a worthwhile but, the Corrupted Cube Gun can easily keep our ammo topped up and allow consistent use throughout the battle, provided of course one is only shooting during the vulnerable windows. As for the frequently spawned minions, they are the least of one's concerns, since our melee weapon should put most of them down with a single strike. Even where damage is received throughout the battle, defenses should remain roughly uncompromised. Alright, moving on to the Astropath, this one is a dynamic sentry and tests more of the flexibility of our Blitzer, particularly with frequent offensive readjustment. But even with that said, this boss is rather straightforward. In this Onion's experience, one is better off using the Corrupted Cube Gun and maintaining controlled fire for a steady flow of explosions when inflicting damage to the Astropath itself. When it issues its delayed 3-pronged projectiles, they can only be destroyed with the Bonesaw LMG. The frequency will increase as the Astropath's health is depleted. When it phases into its spherical form, I really don't know how else to describe it, then this is a good opportunity to activate the Cube Room and switch to the LMG. This will allow the LMG to replenish ammo and fire continuously with reduced heat generation. The Skewer mod can also be used for additional damage. The only time melee is ever used in this battle is during the forced trial of specters. Otherwise, one may be able to run up to the sphere and do melee damage there, but this is not a tactic that this Onion has actually tried. This battle is far from difficult, especially with the levels of defense on this build. Overall, with the correct use of one's weapons, this battle can be an easy victory. Transitioning to bosses of strength, first we have Corruptor. This one is a dynamic boss and is friendly to the synergy of our Blitzer. The traditional route of taking this one down is probably the best. Target the Guardian first, then lay waste to the Corruptor when the weak spot is exposed. Even though the Guardian is quite the brawler, everything it has to throw at our Blitzer can be easily dispatched or tanked. The detached arms can be incapacitated with a single melee strike, or explosions from the Corrupted Cube Gun. Due to our degree of melee damage, getting in close with the Guardian is a viable means of chipping off health. However, after the first phase, one's timing will require increased discretion due to the Corruptor being a sore loser and employing an area denial attack. Once the Guardian is down, the Cube Room can be activated, and the Bonesaw can be used to take out the incoming root moths. The rest with the Corruptor is simple. What makes this boss friendly to our build synergy is how dynamic the build is allowed to be. All of our offensive strategies have a substantial role in this battle. Now, this demonstration does not show our Explorer getting his ass beat in this battle. Rest assured, this build is virtually immune to what would typically be considered devastating damage. Besides, when in doubt, just pop a relic. Alright, for our next boss of strength, we visit the Nightweaver, a dynamic brawler. Now, in this demonstration, this Onion was experimenting with the Coach Gun.
This isn't right.
But the primary weapon is not integral to the success of this build during this battle, so bear with me here. Now, the Nightweaver is far easier in her second phase than her first phase, at least for this build anyway. The main reason is that in her first phase, she'll exercise more evasive movements and ranged attacks, leaving one to mostly use their ranged weapons. Now, the Corrupted Cube Gun is still a great option due to the explosions. This Onion heavily recommends firing in maximum bursts of 5 to make use of regular explosions while leaving room to use one's melee strikes. Following the Nightweaver's melee attacks, one should have adequate time to use a neutral dodge charged melee strike. The coach gun, or whatever primary one may wish to use, has its niche for when she exposes her weak spot. Otherwise, one's close range options will reign as king for offense. The same can be said for her second phase, but even more so, because now she's bringing the fight to our explorer. The greatest caution one will have to exercise is avoiding her grab once her health is low enough. Otherwise, she plays right into the hands of our Bolstered Blitzer. Alright, despite the glory of our Bolstered Blitzer, there are some painfully difficult bosses that make one's life a living hell. First up, we have the Custodian's Eye, a die-hard sentry. It's similar to Legion in that it is vulnerable when returning fire to our explorer. However, this is the only time its weak spot is available. Otherwise, its hide is armored and the small middle point grants regular damage. The difficulty with this boss is the forced use of shortcomings. Unfortunately, melee strikes are totally out of the equation, and the cube gun is really only useful for replenishing ammo since it cannot grant weak spot hits.
Oh, that sucks.
The Custodian's Eye is annoyingly notorious for making our Blitzer dance to avoid its onslaught. Purple explosive lasers, sweeping lasers, minions, blue staggering projectiles, and forced trial events. These offensive measures in and of themselves are not terrible, but finding the time to replenish ammo is where the difficulty came in. This became more pronounced after getting the Custodian down to half health. The best time this onion found to use the cube room was during the purple explosive laser. There will have to be some creative movements to stay in the cube room consistently. Long story short, the Custodian's Eye will force more of an attritional strategy of our Blitzer. This build may be a dynamic fighter, but will consequently struggle to capitalize in big damage numbers. This battle will prey on one's patience. Alepsis Tara is similar in nature, another die-hard sentry with an array of ranged attacks that demand frequent adjustment. It is worth noting that this onion took on the hardest version of Alepsis Tara. Naturally, it is a lot harder to take down compared to its weakened versions. For this build though, the LMG is like a pellet gun, and the damage numbers will remain unimpressive. This can only change during the few times one can get close to use the cube gun's explosions, or during the second phase when Alepsis Tara gets close with his or its tentacles. When this opportunity presents itself, one should activate Juggernaut and prioritize charged melee strikes. Bonus points if one can have the Wrathbringer mod maximized for optimized damage. This version of Alepsis Tara can still pack quite a punch, but the saving grace of this battle is the defenses at our disposal, and using the cube room is not all that difficult. Just like Custodian's Eye, capitalized offense is minimized and short-lived. Attrition is one's main option, especially in the last phase when he or it is far away, and one can only use the bone saw and the skewer mod. Now, generally this onion was able to notice a bit of a trend with the category of bosses we face and the amount of difficulty we encounter. Another honorable mention of difficulty would be the Bloat King, not necessarily because the Bloat King is devastating, but more so because offense is a struggle for this build. One will have to mainly rely on the LMG and skewer mod. Meanwhile, their melee weapon and corrupted cube gun will take a back seat. But just as there are honorable mentions of weakness, there are other bosses that are honorable mentions of strength, particularly brawlers such as Bruin, the Blade of the King, or even Talrotha, specifically the non-metaphysical form, since they allow our Bolstered Blitzer to exercise their most powerful offensive measures on a more consistent basis. Overall, it would seem that sentries, particularly those that are very difficult to hit directly and that constantly require our Bolstered Blitzer to move, create the most difficulty. Now, not every boss is the same in their respective categories, and every build will have its fair share of strengths and weaknesses. With that said, there are probably some modifications that can be made to ease some of the difficulties this build may face, but that will be for a different video. Anyways, that concludes our discussion today. Thank you guys for watching, and this onion will see you guys next time.